Hello neighbors, it's Brad here at Etrailer, and today we're taking a look and installing the Blue Ox base plate on a 2016 Kia Soul. The base plate is going to be the structural foundation on your vehicle, and that way you can hook up to it and tow it down the road. But not only are you just going to be creating a structural mounting point for your tow bar, but also the rest of your components to make that complete flat tow package. And Blue Ox done a really good job of keeping this really clean. There's a small opening on the grill of the Soul, and all of your components can mount up right there. So fit and finish, they've done a really good job of keeping it OEM looking when it's not in flat tow use and towing down the road. But when you are ready to tow, it's going to be simple to just take your removable arms, give it a quarter turn, those arms are going to snap into place, and then you'll be able to mount up your tow bar. Not only can you hook up your tow bar, but you have your tabs for your safety chains, a bracket for your breakaway switch, mounting points for your 6-pole diode wiring, and all of that seems highly underrated unless you get some other brands that don't always allow for those mounting options out the gate. This makes it super easy to get everything mounted up nice and sturdy, and again, with the finished product, it looks really good overall. Some of your other base plates out there, you don't get this clean of a look. Now, something that's important is going to be the ground clearance. Because the car is fairly low ground clearance and it's using the lower opening, you want to make sure that you're going to have your tow bar as level as possible or within a 3-inch range. So, in fact, today ours comes in from the ground to the center of the pin at 13 inches. But the hitch on our RV is 19.5, so we did have to get a high-low adapter to get our tow bar nice and level. Speaking of tow bar, I'm going to move this forward and I'll show you how to hook up your flat tow setup on your Blue Ox base plate. Now, when it comes to getting everything hooked up, really simple here. We do have a Blue Ox Alpha 2 tow bar, which is a great option. It's going to fall into the weight categories of, or at least the capacities of what a Soul would be, and it makes hooking up super easy because Blue Ox to Blue Ox, it's going to be a perfect hookup just like that. Now, if you have a previous tow bar or you have your eye on a different brand, not to worry, you can get that tow bar with the adapters to work with the Blue Ox base plate. So just make sure when choosing a tow bar that you do get those Blue Ox ends. Now from here, our safety chain loop, it sticks out just enough, makes it really easy to hook up. You'll have your breakaway switch. So we'll get this attached to the hitch on our RV. And then also our 6-pole diode wiring. And then you get your other side on. Once you have that all hooked up, you get your vehicle in flat tow mode and you're ready to go. Now, when it comes to flat towing any vehicle down the road, including your Soul, there's going to be 5 main required components that you'll need to do it properly. The first one, starting on the vehicle side, is going to be your base plate. That structurally mounts to the frame of the vehicle and becomes the towing point to be able to tow the vehicle down the road safely. That's also going to give you the hookup points for your other components. The connection point between your base plate and the hitch on your RV is going to be your tow bar. And again, that just kind of keeps it going down the road safely. You also have safety cables, just like you'd have on a trailer. In case of a disconnect, those cables are going to keep everything attached. Your braking system is going to slow and stop proportionally when you apply the brakes on your RV to the towed vehicle. That way it slows and stops. It's not going to put pressure on the brakes on the RV. And in case of a catastrophic disconnect where everything was to fail, it'll pull the breakaway switch, applying the brakes on the vehicle. That way it's not rolling down the highway. Diode wiring is going to be this umbilical that we have going from our 7-pole to the 6-pole, and that's going to transmit light signals from your RV to the taillights on your towed vehicle, giving you running lights, turn signals, as well as brake lights, and that's going to keep you safe and legal. Some braking systems also require tapping into that diode wiring, so it is crucial to get that. And today we used our Stay and Play Duo from Demco as our braking system, and that is one that you will need to tie into diodes. Now, when it comes to the installation of the base plate on the Soul, this one is not particularly easy to do. There's a decent amount of drilling required, as well as doing some modification to the frame, just slightly to make room for that base plate to bolt up. But at the end of the day, you want to make sure that structurally it's going to hold on there, and the finished product does make sure that it's going to be secure. But with that being said, the drilling that's required and some of the fit and finish is a little bit tricky. It is going to require the fascia coming off. That's pretty standard for most base plates. And I do recommend, if you are going to be doing this all yourself, if you're going to be doing the base plate, try to do the rest of the components at the same time. It allows you to run all of your wiring and plumbing a lot easier and cleaner with that fascia still off. Now, if you watch the video, which I'll walk you through step by step, and you decide that this isn't for you, maybe you don't have the time to do it, the tools to do it, or even the want to do it, I totally get it, but I want you to still be able to flat tow your Kia. So you can reach out to our dealer locator to find someone close to you, and that way they can get your vehicle all set up and you'll be able to flat tow in no time. For you DIYers, if you're installing it yourself or you go through a dealer and get it installed, please share pictures once it's all finished. We'd love to see how you set up your flat tow and what worked for you, so any comments, tips, or tricks are always more than welcome. Something I will preface with this, I was short on hardware out of the box. So when you're opening up your base plate, double check. There is going to be a list of contents. Make sure that you have all of that hardware before beginning. Now, to get our base plate installed, it's going to require the fascia coming off, and that's pretty standard for just about every base plate. And the base plate is going to be mounting up on the frame and have attachment points for the rest of our flat tow components. So I highly, highly recommend doing the rest of your flat tow components, whether it be diodes, braking system, or any other accessories at the same time. It's going to allow you to really get those wires ran nice and clean, and it's going to be a lot easier because it's going to be open and allow you to do that. So with that being said, you're going to have the fascia off for a little bit, have a nice clean spot to keep this so it doesn't get damaged, and going with that, there's going to be a lot of hardware that comes off. So have a nice organized spot to keep the hardware. It'll make reinstallation a lot easier. First thing we're going to do to get our fascia off is open up the hood, and we're going to go to this cover that's above our radiator. There's 2 bolts in each corner, or 1 on each corner. That's a 10 millimeter. We'll get that removed first. And then there's a series of plastic push pins across the top that you'll see. These ones are on the 2 tabs that are supporting the air box, and then just the remainder to get this removed. And plastic push pins, pretty easy. A trim panel tool does make a world of difference. It makes it a lot easier. If you don't have one of these are really nice if you work on cars regularly. But a flathead screwdriver will also work. What you're going to do is just pop up the center. There should be a groove to get your trim panel tool or screwdriver in there, and then from here you can remove the entire plastic push pin. So we'll get these removed. Now head to each of the corners where your fascia meets the front quarter panel, and you're going to find a 10 millimeter screw. It's facing up, so it's kind of a weird angle. So I have a swivel here with an extended socket, and we'll get this removed on both sides. Now, if you're running into clearance issues and you're having trouble gaining access, what you can do is hop in the vehicle, turn the steering wheel, and that's going to open that up, making it a lot easier for you. Now you can head underneath your fascia with your trim panel tool, and there's going to be plastic push pins along the lower air dam. Now ours is missing a few, but we're going to have 2 of them that are going to be kind of on this triangular corner piece with the mud flap, and then you're going to have ones in the middle here that you'll remove, and then also on the other side. So we'll get those all taken out. Now at this point, we should be able to remove our fascia, and something that I do is put painter's tape along the edge of the fascia as well as the front fender, because as you're pulling this off and also when you're putting it back on, you run the risk of clear coat rubbing against each other and chipping paint. So a nice easy way to protect that is running painter's tape on there. Now to get this removed, you're going to want an extra set of hands. Not that it's heavy or anything like that. It can get bulky, and sometimes there's going to be electrical connections that you're going to have to undo as you pull the fascia off, so don't just pull it straight back. So I have my friend Jesse here helping me, and the best way to do this is start on each corner, and it's just going to be a series of clips along this whole portion. And once you start to pop them off, you can work your way towards the middle. It should come off fairly easily. So just pull back on the corner. It's got kind of an inset where that bolt was originally mounted, and then if you just pull pressure back as you go, it's going to start to unclip. And if you need to, you can kind of grab on the bottom and loosen it up too. Don't try to fight it too much. It should pop off with a little bit of love. If you need to, you can also spray some soapy water in these seams. It'll help kind of pop that off. Once we get to the middle where we remove those plastic push pins, we are going to want to pull up a little bit to help kind of get this to pop out. As we're pulling back, where we remove the screws on those corners, there is a tab that kind of holds that in place. So push it forward, and you can see that's where it's hanging up, and then it should come off fairly easily. Now, depending on your trim, you may or may not have, fog light connections. If that's the case, you're going to want to undo those. We don't have any on ours today, so we can set our fascia aside. The fascia removed, we're going to start getting some things taken out of the way for our base plate to fit up. And one of the first things we'll do is going to be our temperature sensor. This just lives on the top of the bumper beam. We're going to want to pop that off. And a trim panel tool definitely comes in handy on these ones. Just take your time here. And that just pops out. Looks like a tab on each side, so if you can slide a trim panel tool or something to pinch those tabs, it should come out a little bit easier. And we'll just set this aside for now. And our base plate is going to be eventually bolting up in this area where the bumper beam is attached. So we need to temporarily remove that. And in order to do that, you're going to need a 12mm socket. And there's 4 bolts. So there's 2 up top and then 2 down below on each side that we're going to remove. There's also going to be a 10mm nut. We can leave that on there for now. So let's just focus on these bolts, and then we can get that 10mm removed. With those bolts taken out, now we can attack that 10mm. So we have a nut that's on top on the passenger side. On the driver's side, it's on the bottom, but we'll just get both of those removed. Now our base plate is going to go around the frame, and we're going to be drilling around here. It's imperative that we move our reservoir fluid bottle, as it is going to get in the way as we're cutting. And you, more times than not, don't have to completely remove it or unhook it. Sometimes you can get away with just getting it out of the way, and it makes it a little bit easier to not have to separate lines. And that's what I'm going to try to do. But to get this taken off, there's going to be 3 points that we need to attack to get it loosened up and out of the way. To get access to 2 of the bolts, they're going to be a 10mm socket to get those taken out. There's one that's directly behind it, so you may have to push back on the fender liner. And the same goes for the one up top. It's kind of at an odd angle, but I think we can gain access to those with an extension. We'll get those first, and then we have a Phillips head screw that we're going to remove. We'll leave this one last. That way we can get those bolts taken out first. Due to the angle of the bolt that's up top, it's kind of tricky to get to, but there is a plastic push pin that just goes through this slot. If you pop that off, you'll be able to kind of move this out of the way and get a little bit cleaner of an angle to that bolt. Now this Phillips head screw is actually pretty tight, and you don't want to strip it out. So grab a large Phillips head and really put pressure on it as you're loosening it up. You have to completely remove it. I think if you back it out, it's slotted. And in fact, that might be a little bit easier to not have to put it back in. So I'm going to loosen it up enough, and I should be able to slide this back. And as I mentioned, I'm going to try my best to not have to completely disconnect this, but what I'll do is give ourselves a little bit more wiggle room, kind of loosening this up, and we may have to get some of the electrical connections taken down. So we have this plastic push pin or Christmas tree that's holding this wire that's giving us tension. I'm going to pop this out and see if that helps. Now I'm able to slide this out of the way, and I do believe that you probably still could get away with zip tying this up and out. But since we're doing the video on this and I want to make sure that you all can see everything we're working on, I am going to completely remove this. And there is a plastic clip that's up top that's very similar to these that I need to remove. And the same goes for here as well as our plug. Now once we unhook our fluid reservoir, it is going to want to start leaking. So if you have something that can cap it up, that's a great idea. If not, what we'll do is we'll pull those hoses up, raise them, and that way there's nothing coming out of those. And then when we get the reservoir out, just store it in a fashion where it's not going to be leaking out of them. So first thing, I'm going to get my electrical connections all taken off. Get this taken off, it's just a tab on the top. You might want to push a little pressure with the screwdriver, something along those lines to get that popped off. I'll get these separated. Sometimes pushing on the back side will give you a little bit of a gap to be able to get your trim panel tool in here. And take your time. You don't want to crack this because it's all molded into one piece. You do run the risk of cracking your reservoir, so just take your time. And that electrical connection has a Christmas tree up top. It's located right by the filler neck, so I'll get that popped out. I found once I got all the electrical stuff taken off and just kind of undid our hoses off of the clips that are on the reservoir, I can leave this all attached and not lose any washer fluid and still be able to get this out of the way, assuming that you can set this somewhere. But again, if you do want to completely get it out of the way, just kind of get this to where we don't have fluid there. It is going to leak a little bit. That's kind of nature of it. You just pull your hoses off. And you might want to make a mark on each of them. I don't know if it's, particular about where it needs to go, but maybe put a paint marker on one. That way you're getting the proper hose back in place. Now this screw, we do need to completely remove it. Originally I thought that we could leave it in place, but eventually our base plate's going to sit flush against the frame rail, and that's going to cause issue, so we'll get this completely removed. Now, just like the reservoir, we're going to be going on this side of the frame on the driver's side, and we have an air baffle that needs to be removed, and pretty easy to do here, but it does have plastic electrical cables that kind of mount up to that, so we do want to pry that off. And then there's going to be 3 locations with 10mm bolts to get it removed. The first one's pretty easy. It's going to be located on the front side. And then the other 2, there's going to be one on the back side that's facing the same way as this, and then there's one underneath. So if you just kind of reach under, you can feel where those mount up. We'll get those bolts taken off, and then we can remove our baffle. That lower bolt, you can move the bottom portion of that skid plate when we remove the fascia, and that should give you enough room to get raised up and in place. It's kind of up there, so you may need an extension to get to it. And now we should be able to just separate this. The baffle does go into some plumbing up there for the intake, but I think we should be able to get this popped out. There's also one on the bottom too, so I think it just separates with a little bit of tugging here and there, so we'll get it popped out. Now you might have already noticed that this top of the baffle, or at least what goes into it, might have come loose when you were taking off the cover up top. You can just pull this out. That's going to give us a little bit more space. And also, as I was taking this out, there is a wire harness that has, again, a clip that's attaching to it. So we're going to need to separate that before we can pull it out of place. We have 2 factory grounds that are located on our driver's side. We're going to remove those, and then we're going to be drilling up on the flange with a 1/4-inch drill bit, and we're going to remount those up with new hardware. So we have a 1/4-20 by 3/4. There's 2 of those with nylon lock nuts. So we'll get these taken out, we'll drill those holes, and then just bolt those back up, and that way we have our ground back. So removing the plastic push pin that's in the frame is going to give you a little bit more room to get these up in a good spot. And ideally you want the flap out the tab to make full contact. Once the bolt goes through, that metal of the threads going through is going to be enough to ground it, but you want to make sure that long term your vehicle is grounded properly. So being able to kind of move these up to the flange where we can definitely get the nut on the back side is going to be key. If you go a little bit further back, it's going to be a little bit harder to do that. So I'm going to try to get these mounted up nice and clean and out of the way up here. Now I got our grounds mounted up, and just make sure that you're on this flange because the base plate's going to live on this portion of the frame. You want to make sure that we don't have any clearance issues. So just make sure I bent my tab on this one up just to make sure that we have that clearance. Now grab a paint marker and an angle grinder, a Sawzall, a reciprocating saw, whatever you have to cut through some metal. Because we're going to be needing to notch out this. It really goes right below this bracket and just straight across. And we'll be cutting into metal. This is kind of a fairly easy to cut through metal slash plastic, I think, that we have here. But once we get to the flange, we want this flush with the frame rail. So we'll be cutting out this mounting hole here, and then we'll be repeating on the other side. So safety glasses on, we'll get this cut out, and then if we need to, we can grind down any extra edges. Now with this cut, you can see pretty close that it's flush. I do have some just areas here where I'm going to go back with the grinding wheel to clean it up a little bit. And then pretty important, you're going to want to go back on any of the raw exposed metal and just put either a paint marker or just some spray paint along that, because that raw metal can turn into rust fairly quick. A nice coat of paint's going to protect that long term. We also need to trim out the bumper beam, or at least the portion that's hanging out. So what I did is just put it in place and just loosely put my hardware in so it's holding. And then with a paint marker, I'm just going to trace the back side of it. And that way we have a template of where we're going to cut out. So with those templates made, we'll go ahead, we're going to cut this out. And same thing, we're going to just sand it down, get any of those burrs knocked down, and then spray paint this as well. Now, we're going to hang tight on putting the bumper beam back up. That way we have plenty of clearance when we get our base plate up. But we do need to trim out the plastics. You can see this line kind of right where the molding kind of starts to curve. We'll cut that out. You need to be really careful though, because obviously you have your AC condenser here. You don't want to hit any of that. I'm using a multi-tool. Being that it's plastic, you can kind of get away with a lot of different ways to cut this, but we'll cut this out and then we're going to repeat on the other side. Now once you cut that out, there is just a clip holding this bottom part on the condenser, so you can take that portion out and you can dispose of this. Now we're getting ready to put our base plate up, and I just mocked mine up and realized this top corner, really try to get this as flush as possible with the bottom side of this bracket. That way it's really going to get the most thick meat of the frame to drill into. It's going to be flush. But we also need to make sure that we have a reference of how far back that base plate goes. Because we're going to be drilling holes, we want to make sure that it's all lined up as best as possible. So what we'll do is from the face of the frame, we'll go back 4.5 inches and just make a mark. And that's going to be where the back side of our base plate will butt up against, and that way we know it's in place. So at this point, if you want an extra set of hands to get that base plate raised up, you're also going to want a set of clamps so you can clamp that in place while we do our drilling. Now we'll slide our base plate in. It might be a little bit tight in the beginning. If you use a dead blow to kind of knock it past, it should, as long as you have those cut flush, it should go in okay. That line that we made with the paint marker is going to line up with this. So we'll slide this in and kind of get it adjusted. And then I'll have my clamps ready to get it in place. Now, first thing, I marked that out and got it all lined up. It's 4 1/4, and you do want it to go a little bit further because where we're going to be drilling through, it's pretty crucial just to make sure that we have the hardware going through the opening on those frame horns to be able to get the hardware tightened down. So I have clamps on here. I got it all level. Everything looks nice and even across the board. So check it quite a few times because once you start drilling, that's going to become the template for all the holes that we drill. And on our passenger side, we're going to focus first on the top hole. And we're going to be doing that on both sides so we can get that bolt in place and that way it can hold itself. I recommend starting with a smaller bit and then you can work it up. They say a 30 seconds. The main thing is have your bolt ready with a split washer, and we're going to just make sure that it passes through nice and clean. So have that handy, but we'll start by getting the top rearmost hole drilled out on both sides. Once you get the hole drilled through and you've tested that your bolt will pass through, put that split washer on and also some red Loctite. And we're going to grab our handle nut, and this is going to feed inside of the frame rail and become where it bolts through. So I'll pass this in. I'm just going to get it started and make sure I have it started on both sides. And then once we have them in place, we can take our clamps down and really tighten it exactly where we want it. And that's going to allow us to get better access to the holes to drill out the rest. I got both of them in place, and I double checked all of my where I had my base plate sitting, and definitely get it adjusted how you want. And then we'll come back. The torque settings are going to be found in the instruction manual. So we'll get our torque wrench dialed in, and then we'll tighten this down. And that should really hold that in place while getting the other ones in. But now we're going to continue drilling and pretty much doing the same thing that we just did with those. But our passenger side is only going to get 2 more drilled out in this. So it's going to be the 2 that are towards the front. The back lower hole, we're not going to be drilling out. And the reason is the clearance for the reservoir bottle. It's not going to allow for us to use that. So we'll get those drilled out. And then on the other side, we have 3 remaining ones, which is going to be all 4 of the ones that create kind of that square. Now, this is when I ran into issues. Our handle nuts, they did not include enough from the factory, so shame on Blue Ox for that, but you are going to need these to get your hardware bolted down. So what I'd recommend is when you get your base plate, open it up, take a look at the hardware. You should have 7 of the square style, and then there's also 2 nut style that you should have. So make sure you have these handle nuts. These aren't something that you can just randomly grab. So luckily I'm able to source them here just because we have spare parts, but it is really important because at this point you'd kind of be stuck. So double check your hardware. Now once you get all of those hardware in place, so we have the 3 on our passenger side, the 4 on our driver's side, you're gonna be left with those tabs. And if they're getting in the way, once you torque them down, you can just kind of move them around and bend them, and eventually that small weld will kind of pop off. You can cut them if you need to. But at this point, we have the base plate bolted up. We're going to need to get our bumper beam put back in place. And as I mocked mine up, I realized I'm going to have to trim off just a little bit more for it to slide in here. And something else you may want to do is we have our horn that's mounted up on this bracket. A 12mm socket's going to take that down. It's going to make it a lot easier to feed our bumper beam back in place. We'll slide this over, making sure that we slide over the studs on both sides. And then we can start putting our bumper hardware back in place. So as you're tightening it down, make sure you get that small nut on the studs, and you're obviously going to notice that one of the mounting points is missing because we cut that off. So just get the remaining hardware all tightened down. So we're not done drilling yet. You'll find the hole that we have on our base plate is now pretty well butted up against our bumper beam, and we're going to need to drill all the way through that. So go ahead and get these drilled out. Now with the holes drilled out, we're going to be putting the bolts through just like we did before with handle nuts, but there's the small nuts that they're the same thread pitch and same size, but this is a smaller diameter, and that's going to allow you to feed this through the hole on the side of the bumper. And you are going to have to put some pretty creative bends to get this to line up with that hole and get it started. But unfortunately, the welds and spatter in these make these completely unusable. I can't thread anything through them. I tried to clear them out with a tap. It's just not working very well. So I am going to have to source 2 more of these in order to get that bolted up. Hopefully that's not the case with your kit. So the trick to getting these in place, we're really going to try to get this as flat as possible, and that way we can start threading the bolt in. But what I like to do is kind of eyeball where I'd need a bend, and normally I can kind of work with it. So putting a small bend like this, the main thing is keeping this as flush as possible with the metal. So you do have to kind of go at a slight angle, and then once I get this fed in, I can adjust from there, and if I need to, I can make a few more bends. It does look like I need to get a little bit more aggressive on this angle, so just bend that up a little bit more until you start to see it lined up with the hole, and then you can feed your hardware in. Now, it is tricky. You're going to have to play around with it, throw some more bends in it if you need to, but once you kind of start to get those threads going, you can get it snugged down, and then we can torque these down all the same. Something I've learned with these, do not use an impact. A lot of times that'll snap off the weld, and then you're left with hardware that's not able to be torqued down. So we'll get this torqued, and then we can either cut this off or break that off, and we'll get both sides put in place. Now, at this point, we have our base plate installed, and the last step we need to do for the installation is get our safety cables in place. And those are going to attach to this lower safety chain hole with a quick link. And the goal is to wrap this around the frame, so that way, if everything was to fail, it's still going to be structurally holding on to the car. You know, it's obviously a worst case scenario, but it is an added safety feature. So I'll loop this up, but I do recommend, at least on the passenger side, because it's going to be a tight tolerance here for the reservoir bottle, I'm going to wait until I get that back in place. Just make sure that you get these looped. You just kind of make a loop together, use the quick links to get them in, and the main thing is go around portions of the vehicle that are going to be structurally sound past the base plate. We can put our reservoir bottle back in. We can also put our air baffle in place. Really everything that can go back just in the reverse order that we took it off. Something that you do want to think about though is keeping that fascia off until you get all of your accessories mounted up for your flat toe components. And this one, the opening's rather small, so what I would recommend doing is get all of your diode wiring and all your braking functions kind of routed out, slide that through, and then you can mount them up. It'll be a lot easier rather than having to go around a 6-pole plug. And that's exactly what we're going to do. I'll get all of my flat toe components mounted up, and then I'll show you finished product and if there's any trimming required to get the fascia put back on. Something that I did forget to mention, that Phillips head screw that we had holding up on the reservoir, this is going to be replaced. You have a shoulder bolt with a flat washer. This is just going to thread in. So just make sure when you go to put everything back in place that you're threading this in, and that's going to become the new mount for our reservoir. Now I got my flat toe components in place. I have my breakaway switch mounted up, and I mentioned earlier, but doing your diode wiring, I would just have your wiring go out and then put the 6-pole on after the fascia. It'll make it a lot cleaner. And I mentioned those safety cables. I looped it around our base plate and then just went completely around this area. There is space here, and just make sure it's not going to be in the way of any belts or moving parts. You're going to go ahead and do the same thing on the other side. Now that breakaway switch, they do give you a bracket. It's a really nice one because it puts it in line with everything, and I test fit my fascia on here before mounting it. But essentially what I did is there's a hole that's underneath your bumper beam. I just went over just a little bit here and used a self-tapper and then bolted our breakaway switch up, puts it in a nice spot. So once you get all your wires ran nice and clean, zip tied up and how you want it to look, at this point you can start grabbing your fascia, and we're going to put it on in the reverse order. The main thing is when you start to slide it over, it is going to get pretty tight here. You shouldn't have to trim it, but just take your time kind of feeding it on, and then from here it's pretty much going to be just the reverse order that we took it off. And that was a look at installation of the Blue Ox base plate on a 2016 Kia Soul.